Yeah, there we go. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Marcella. All right, go ahead.
And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red. The power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword.
Amen. So he was fiery red, this horse, and red represents fire and blood. It depicts war. That's what red is. And so this false peace dissolves into a worldwide war, and a bloody war, like a Holocaust. It's going to make World War II look like a small war. So it's going to be worldwide. And then it was, in verse 4, it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth. So it was granted to him to take peace from the earth. So in a sense, who granted it to him? Was it Satan? Was it God? What do you think?
I think it was God.
Yeah, totally. Because God has got everything under control, and no one can do anything unless God allows them. Even Satan. Satan can't do anything. You just look at the story of Job. He asked God permission to do bad things to Job, and God allowed him, but he had to ask. So God only allows, and so he's letting this person to get a sword to kill people, and God is allowing that. And so he allows a false peace, and then he allows war. So he allowed both. He's allowing this. You think of COVID-19, he's allowed that. Nothing can happen unless he's allowed it. So it isn't Satan, it's God that's the one who's who's controlling all this. So sometime in the early part of the first half of the tribulation, during the beginning of the birth pains, world peace turns into world conflict. And you'll see that in Matthew 24:8. It says, all these are the beginning of sorrows. And that's what if you remember Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, where Jesus told his disciples what was going to be the things to come, and now the things of the end. And he told them all in detail. And it all lines up with what John is saying, with Daniel. It all kind of just lines up perfectly. And in Mark 13:7-8, I'll ask Nancy if you can look that up for us. Mark 13:7-8.
Okay.
We know this is a time of sorrows. What's after the time of sorrows? Do we know?
Well, then you're going to have what they call the Great Tribulation, which is be the second half. And that's going to be when Christ reveals himself, and it will be like the war. The war will continue. Will continue from here on all the way through the 7 years. But it's going to intensify in the second half of the tribulation. So these are times of sorrow, and it's going to continue, but it's going to be multiplied as you go. So that's, and God said that if he didn't shorten this time, he's going to shorten it because it's so severe that it's never been seen before, that he had to kind of cut it short. And that's why it's 7 years, and then he'll come, and he will have 1,000 years with him, called the millennial. All right, you have Mark 13:7-8.
Yep. And you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in many parts of the world, as well as famines, but this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come.
Amen. So these are the first, like Marcella was saying, this is the beginning of a woman in labor. You two women would know that because you've had children, and as it gets worse and worse until you give birth. And then it's the most joyful thing after the baby is born, it's just a celebration. It's great. But until then, there's going to be birth pangs. And so this is the same way with the tribulation. It's going to be the same way. And then the war is going to be so severe that you've never seen it. You think of John and the people 2,000 years ago, they didn't understand what a nuclear bomb was, or what a tank or a jet airplane or cannons. They didn't understand that, but not because of the technology. The wars, it could be severe. Look what's happening in the Ukraine. They have like a soldier can carry an anti-tank thing on the shoulder and then destroy a tank that's made out of heavy steel and can just totally destroy it. Well, they couldn't imagine that back then. Back then it was, it was swords and spears and shields. But now the savagery will multiply. It will be so much greater. So, and John is writing all this. It's going to be like a massacre, really. And then in verse 4 in Revelation 6, it says, and there was given to him a great sword. So this person was given to him a great sword. And sword in the Greek is translated machaira, and it refers to a short stabbing sword that the Roman soldiers carried to battle. You may have seen some movies in the old Roman movies where they come out and they have a little sword. And it was that kind of sword that it's referring to here. And also that sword not only was used by the Roman soldier, it was also used by assassins when they went and assassinated people. So there's going to be a mix. There's going to be chaos, there's going to be battle, there's going to be assassinations, there's going to be severe wars, massacres, rebellions, governments, two factions rebelling against one another. So it's going to be chaotic. It's totally chaotic. And the Antichrist is going to play a major role in this. And actually, he's kind of the chief. He was the chief architect of the false peace. Now he's going to be the one of the leading things when it comes to the war, because even though he may not necessarily have started the war, he's going to be a big player in it. So he can preserve his authority and his power. He wants to be the power. So he will be very involved all the way to the end, the Antichrist. And behind the Antichrist is Satan. So Satan, in a way, Satan wants to you remember Lucifer wanted to be like God. So he's going to be doing everything he can to so that people can worship him as if he was a God. And he's going to do all kinds of things to maintain that power. And whenever you see people like that, they always want to maintain the power. And Satan will continue to do that. And I ask you to look at Daniel 8:24. Now, John, if you can look that up, Daniel 8:24. And this here is specifically talking about the coming Antichrist.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find Daniel.
Daniel, it's the last of it's in the middle of the Old Testament. There's Isaiah, Jeremiah, there's Ezekiel, there's Daniel shortly after that. It's after Proverbs and Psalms and all that.
What's the chapter and verse?
Daniel 8, verse 24. 8:24. It's talking specifically about the Antichrist. Okay. This is hundreds of years before Christ, and Daniel is prophesying that already.
He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause a shocking amount of destruction and succeed in everything he does. He will destroy powerful leaders and devastate the holy people.
Amen. So this is the Antichrist. So he's going to be very skillful at war, just like he was at promoting peace, even though it was false peace. Going to be a politician who can lead in that way. But he's a deceiver. And in Matthew 24:9, ask if Marcella, if you can look that one up. Matthew 24:9.
Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake.
Amen. So then they will deliver you up to tribulation to kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. If you're believing Christ, you'll be hated, and it says it's going to deliver you to tribulation. So, and then the Antichrist setting up of abomination of desolation will touch off a massive conflict. My question to you, what is the abomination of desolation? You probably heard that term before. The abomination.
Is it when, I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but is it when Satan comes back? Well, yeah, Satan comes back and he goes into the temple, the temple that's rebuilt, and he takes this like as if he's the seat of God, like as if he's God. Do I have that right?
Yep, exactly.
It's actually Satan, it's in human form though. It's like a man in
Yeah,
human.
it'll be the Antichrist. There will be a false prophet. We'll deal with that in
Yeah,
further
and so
chapters. But
he'll go into the temple that's not built yet, but they're talking about building it. So
right.
that's the third temple then? Is that the third?
Yep. It'll be the third temple. Yep.
Then he goes in and he tells everyone that he's God.
Yep.
Because he, I think, does miracles because he's an angel, right? Lucifer was an angel, one of them.
But you have to remember, the Antichrist actually is a human being, but he is being controlled by Satan. So Satan is behind him, but he is a man.
So he does, from what I understand, he does this Antichrist will do miracles, like
things that appear to be miracles.
They appear to be miracles.
Yeah, because he can do it, can deceive people with.
He deceives people and they think that is actually Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
Yep. Exactly. He wants them to think that he is the one who came,
right, and
the true God who's going to be there. So
people will start following him, and then he'll at some point says, "You got to take my mark or something." We're not there yet, but is that correct?
Yeah. Well, eventually in time, it's going to happen. Yeah. And, but the abomination of desolation specifically prophesied by Daniel is what you said, that he will come into the temple and he will desecrate the temple. He will say, I am God, which is the greatest sin, saying that's a sin of idolatry. And, we in a smaller version, can commit idolatry when we think of us as the gods of our lives. I do what I want, and I'm the God. Nobody tells me what to do. I'm not going to listen to God. I'm the boss, and that's the sin of idolatry. And,
well, that's blasphemy, right? Like they accused Jesus of that, but Jesus was God. They accused him of being blasphemous, but he was God. So
but he was true. So
they didn't see that was the truth. So this time it's flipped around. So it's blasphemy. People aren't going to see that it is. They're going to believe this guy or this evil person. But I think if you're not marked and if you have a pure heart, you're going to know that's not God. You're going to know. So those of us that are still here, right, that are believers are going to know.
Yeah.
So well,
you will know, but many will be deceived. But the elect, the true believers, will not be deceived. They will know.
I think if you ask for the Holy Spirit, right, he'll guide you. So.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to be scared to death. Like, I don't think, like, it's so fear invoking, this part, right? And I don't want to be just afraid all the time.
Yeah.
So I think you have to can only rely on the Holy Spirit to guide you, or you're going to have nightmares about this, because I would.
Exactly. And the written word, Jesus didn't just say, well, do the best you can. No, actually, he wrote it down in the scripture. He gave a vision to John, and he wrote down everything that's going to happen. So we know the written word. We don't know exactly the time, the hour. We don't know every specific detail because we don't need to know that. But he wants us to know and be aware of these things that are going to happen. And so God is so loving that he wrote it down for us. And he has the Holy Spirit in our hearts that he can guide us through this. And so it's going to be a terrible time. And to be aware that this man is going to come into the temple and pretend to be God, which is called desolation, abomination of desolation. So Daniel speaks of that. So we're going to go into Daniel a little bit so you can understand this desolation a little bit better. So Nancy, I'll ask you if you can look up Daniel 11:31.
Again, having trouble finding it. Where is it
Yeah.
again? After Isaiah, Jeremiah? Oh, here we are.
Yeah.
Here. I went
One of
too
the-
far.
Is one of the five major prophets. This is Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. I forget what the other one is. I don't want.
Okay, I've got him, but I forget now what chapter.
Oh, okay, Daniel 11:31.
Okay. 11:31. His army will take over the temple fortress, pollute the sanctuary, put a stop to the daily sacrifices, and set up the sacrilegious object that causes desecration.
Amen. Amen.
What is that
Well,
object?
and as you, if you studied how the temple worked in the Old Testament, there were specific things that God required to be done. Sacrifices had to be done a certain way. They had to wash, a lot of cleansing and washing. Things had to be done specifically. God was thinking, well, they kind of did away with all that. They did what they wanted. And I'll have to tell you that this happened at least once before in Jerusalem at the temple by a Greek, I forget what his name was. It was the Greek leader about 100 years or so before Christ. Forget exactly the name, but he did the same thing. And then he put a pig there, which is against, they shouldn't be. So he made fun of the temple of God. He went into the Holy of Holies and took out all the candle thing, they just desecrated it. And that was a forecasting almost of what's to come. It wasn't the actual abomination of desolation, but in a way it was. In a smaller sense it was, but the true one that will come in the end is the Antichrist, the real Antichrist, will desecrate it the same way. He'll come into the temple and just do away with everything that was God, and he'll just desecrate it. And that's exactly what it's going to do. Daniel 12:11, it says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Okay, this is talking about during the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy. We talked about that last week, which is the 7 years of Revelation. So, and he's saying, and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, so the time that the Antichrist goes into the temple and pretends to be God, it says, which is the abomination of desolation, there shall be 1,290 days, which is 3.5 years. So that's going to be right at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation. It's 3.5 years. So when he does that, it's going to be about that. So
I have a question.
yeah, sure.
So like in the before Christ came, when they had the temples, and then they had they did the sacrifices that God told them to do, because they had the Ark of the Covenant there
Right.
inside the temple. And so once Jesus, and then the temple got destroyed, but once Jesus came, he is the sacrifice. He's our sacrifice to
Yep.
take away our sins. So they don't need to do any more sacrifices. Like when the third temple comes, I don't think they need to do any sacrifices. But for
No.
some reason, I think the Jewish people are the ones that, am I correct? It's the Jewish people that think, because they obviously don't believe in Jesus, I guess, they think that they need sacrifices still. Is
They
that
believe
right?
that Jesus was a prophet,
Right.
but they don't believe he was the Messiah. They're still waiting for the Messiah to come. That's what it is. So Jesus already paid the sacrifice, like you said, he was the sacrifice. There's no more need for another temple. But I'm going to tell you something, and I was reading this past week. The most important is the fourth temple, and the Bible doesn't really talk so much about the fourth temple. The fourth temple will be when we go on to be with the Lord in his kingdom. And it says, and then John says, and I saw no temple there because God is the temple. That's going to be the real temple, is that. Now, but the Jews will make a building, a physical building here in Jerusalem, like you said, during the time of the tribulation. So that's going to happen, but there's no need for it, but it is going to happen. Christ is our temple in the future, and he was a sacrifice. There's no more need for them to make animal sacrifices, because the penalty has been paid already. You remember, Jesus died, the curtain was ripped in half. Now we have access into the Holy of Holies. There's no more need for sacrifices, so we don't need it. But the Jews will make one. That's what it's saying. They're going to make one. So that's where it's at. And ask if Nancy, if you can look up Matthew 24, 15 and 16.
Okay.
24, 15 and 16. And this is Jesus speaking. And anything that you see in Matthew 24, it's our Lord. He's speaking that.
The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills.
Right. And that really means that, because they have to run for their lives. So all the Jews that are in Jerusalem at that time, it says, when you see that, you better run, go into the desert. And that's a lot of it, they will go and hide. So Jesus is warning them about that. Daniel 11, 36 to 45. And that's John, in your best reading voice. There's a lot of reading there. It kind of describes the abomination, desolation in detail. So if you can read it right, Daniel 11, right from 36 to 45.
The king will do as he pleases, exalting himself and claiming to be greater than every god, even blaspheming the gods of gods. He will succeed, but only until the time of wrath is completed. For what has been determined will surely take place. He will have no respect for the gods of his ancestors, or for the God loved by women, or for any other god, for he will boast that he is greater than them all. Instead of these, he will worship the god of fortresses, a god his ancestors never knew, and lavish on him gold, silver, precious stones, and expensive gifts. Claiming this foreign god's help, he will attack the strongest fortresses. He will honor those who submit to him, appointing them to positions of authority and dividing the land among them as their reward. Then at the time of the end, The king of the south will attack the king of the north. The king of the north will storm out with chariots.
I know. Okay, okay, and I see, because your translations show different than mine, Evan. I wasn't sure if we were in the right thing. Okay, go ahead, continue.
The king of the north will storm out with chariots, charioteers, and a vast navy. He will invade various lands and sweep through them like a flood. He will enter the glorious land of Israel, and many nations will fall. But Moab, Edom, and the best part of Ammon will escape. He will conquer many countries, and even Egypt will not escape. He will gain control over the gold, silver, and treasures of Egypt, and the Libyans and Ethiopians will be his servants. But then news from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in great anger to destroy and obliterate many. He will stop between the glorious holy mountain and the sea, and will pitch his royal tents. While he is there, his time will suddenly run out, and no one will help him.
Amen. So this is telling you a little bit about what's going to happen. And then you notice that he's going to be fearful of the kingdoms in the north and the east, which is Russia, China, Iran, Iraq, those nations. Eventually, they're probably going to be the ones who are going to come in and make war with them, and you're going to have to fight them. So that's the second seal, and the wars that begin here during the second seal will continue on till the end of the tribulation, until the coming of our Lord. So this is sort of the beginning of the war. First, there's going to be a false peace, and then there's going to be a war, but this war will continue. It's not going to stop. And it's going to be problems. So let's go to the third seal. And that's Revelation 6, 5, and 6. Marcel, if you can read that.
And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine."
Amen. So this year, the third seal is about famine. And you notice that John says, "And behold, a black horse." So when you say behold, it's like, okay, he was startled. He was like, he took notice. It says there's a black horse. He was shocked. Black here is associated with famine. In Lamentations 5:10, it says, "Our skin is hot as an oven because of the fever of famine." And in Lamentations 4:8, it says, "Now their appearance is blacker than soot. They go unrecognized in the streets. Their skin clings to their bones. It has become as dry as wood." And that's people that are in famine. If you, I know some people like to go out and have a suntan. Well, there's people that have no shelter, and they're exposed, they're under famine, their homes have been destroyed, there's no food, and they're out in the elements a lot, and their skin gets darkened, to protect them from the sun. So a lot of that is going to happen in the thing. It's people aren't going to say, "Oh, look, what a nice suntan." No, if you stay in the sun for a very, very long time, your skin turns, actually, it can get cancerous in a way. I remember as a young boy in Portugal, seeing all the fishermen, because I lived in an island, and all the fishermen that went out and were out in the thing all day long. Well, some of those men, their skin was so black and darkened and wrinkled just from being in the elements, because that's how they made their living. In those days, they don't do that anymore, but in those days, that's the way it was. So there's going to be a lot of that, people exposed, and it's going to be, going to be dark, black. Famine is a logical consequence of a war. That's kind of the way, because food supplies are gonna go low. You could tell today. I was hearing some news about the war in Ukraine, and the war, Ukraine and the Soviet, well, Russia produced 30% of the world's grain, and they can, well, Ukraine can't produce any food right now because most of the people have left, and then the rest that are there are fighting the war, or they're hiding or something. So they're not planting grain. Well, most of the grain that they produce is for themselves. Plus, a lot of the countries in the northern Africa, Middle East, in that area, poorer countries, well, they're not going to have grain. So it's affecting them because, well, they can't produce it. So it's going to be a problem. It's going to, wars cause famine. Not only that, prices will go up because there's not enough, so they have to do that. So it causes economic problems. So that's happening in a small scale in Ukraine and Russia, but when the Antichrist comes, it's going to be big scale. It's going to hit everyone, totally everyone. In Matthew 24:7 it says, "For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." And God has used famines in judgment in the past several times. People say, "Oh no, God doesn't do no." Yes, God does bring judgment. He did that to Israel several times. If you look at Deuteronomy, I'll ask if John, if you look that one up. Deuteronomy 32:23. Deuteronomy is the fourth or fifth book in the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers is the fifth book. Deuteronomy 32 verses 23 and 24. And then Nancy, I'll give you the next one. You can look this one up after John is done. 2 Kings 8:1. 2 Kings 8:1. And then Marcella, after that, you can look up Psalm 105:16. Psalm 105:16. Right? So, John, whenever you're ready.
I will heap disasters upon them and shoot them down with my arrows. I will weaken them with famine, burning fever, and deadly disease. I will send the fangs of wild beasts and poisonous snakes that glide in the dust.
Wow, does this sound like a loving God? But God does do that. God is a God of justice, and he's a vengeful God, and he will use hunger. He will use famine also as a judgment, for sure. Nancy, whenever you're ready with 2 Kings 8:1.
Okay. Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, "Take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine on Israel that will last 7 years."
Amen. And he called a famine that will last 7 years. So he did that. It didn't just come. God called it. God made it happen, because Israel at that time, it was because of King Ahab and Jezebel were brought in, the worship of Baal and false prophets and so on, and God just judged them and brought in a famine. Marcella, Psalm 105:16.
Moreover, he called for a famine upon the land. He brake the whole staff of bread.
Amen. So you see, I look up Leviticus 26:26. He says, "When I have cut off your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall bring back your bread by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied." Means you're gonna have to portion it, because there's not going to be enough, and you're not going to have enough. It's not going to be sufficient, and that's what. And but this one that's coming up is going to be the most devastating famine in history. So food supply will be very minimal. People are not going to live like they are today. during the tribulation. It will be very hard. And then in Revelation 6, when it says a pair of scales, the writer carried in his hand pictures the rationing that's
Yeah.
going to result. So that's the thing. So they have to weigh the. There's going to be starving people in food lines, but they're not going to find enough food to survive. A lot of them are not going to have enough food to feed their own families, live alone themselves. And then John heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures. So this is not the four living creatures, is somebody in the center of it. And if you remember back in Revelations 4, it says that before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal, and in the midst of the throne and around the throne were the four living creatures. So in the midst of the throne and around the throne were the four living creatures, and full of eyes in front and back. So in the midst of them was the Lord himself, was the throne. So the next person that speaks is God himself. And so since so and this is likely the voice of God, the one sitting on the throne. He speaks there as a reminder that the famine is a direct judgment from him. So he wanted to remember, this is my doing, you know, I'm kind of doing this. And then John says, and a quart of wheat is barely enough to sustain one person for one day, a quart of wheat. And the denarius is 1 day's wage back then. So the one denarius was enough to buy only 1 quart of wheat. And that's enough, just not even enough to supply one person, let alone, you know, buy gasoline for his car or pay the mortgage and, you know, pay for electricity and all that. There's not going to be enough money to go around. They'll work, but they'll barely survive. So, and then those families will be able to purchase 3 quarts of barley for denarius, not wheat. Now, barley is a lower grade of wheat that's used to just give to the livestock. And so you can buy 3 times as much, but they're not very nutritious. So some people will do that, buy 3 quarts, but it's not nutritious food, just to provide for their families. So both these scenarios provide starving wages. And it's like a severe famine conditions. That's the way you got to look at that. And then he goes on to say, in the light of those extreme conditions, God cautions people not to damage or waste the oil and the wine. And these are basic food staples that you have to cook and to prepare your food. You have to have those things. And well, don't waste it because they're going to be in short supply as well. So the deceptive peace followed by world wars will result in a devastating global famine. So that's kind of the way that's going to be. Not what you see in Ukraine right now. That's small scale. That's only in a small part of the world. It's going to be worldwide. During the thing. And so it's going to bring complete chaos. But the worst is yet to come. And now we're going to go into the 4th seal. Ask if Nancy, if you can read that. Revelation 6, 7.
Go ahead,
and 8.
Marcella.
Sorry,
Oh.
I have a comment. Is that all right?
Oh,
Yeah.
you got to go.
So
Oh.
that verse that says, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And then it says, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. So could that also mean do not hurt like the anointed, like the ones that believe in Jesus, and the wine will represent Jesus? Like, do not hurt the anointed and the ones that believe in Jesus. Could that all be taken?
Mine
I
says do
won't-
not waste, though.
Yeah, do
So
not
it depends.
waste.
Yeah, do not waste the
Do not
wine.
hurt.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't read that into that. I know that you can make that a spiritual comparison in that way. This year is obviously referring to starvation and people not having enough food. And in those days, that's how they made their food: wheat, barley, and a lot of olive oil for cooking and that. So they says, don't waste it. Be careful with it. I wouldn't read so much spiritual, although somebody may look at it that way. I've never looked at it that way.
Okay.
But I see the direct prophecy is that I think it's referring to food shortages and famines in that way. All right, let's go into the fourth seal, Revelation 6, 7, and 8. Nancy, whenever you're ready.
Okay. When the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the fourth living being say, "Come." I looked up and I saw a horse whose color was pale green. Its rider was named Death, and his companion was the grave. These two were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword and famine and disease and wild animals.
Amen. So the fourth seal is death. And the word pale horse in the Greek here is chloros, which you get the English words chlorophyll or chlorine. And it refers to like a sickly pale yellow-green color. It also it's like a pale green pallor of death, or like a decomposing corpse. You see that kind of color, so it refers to death. And so fittingly, the writers who said on it was death. That's who it was. So death on the masculine like this is obviously a result of a war and famine. And then John sees Hades following death. So he following like the mop up. Okay, so it's coming. It's Hades. Hades here represents the grave. Hades is in a thing is a place of the dead, so it represents the grave. So Hades become like the grave digger of all these things, the person who buries all the dead. And there are going to be so many dead, so many victims. In Revelations 1:18, it says, "I am he." Now this is Jesus talking. "I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forever. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and of death." He holds the keys of Hades and death. And he allows death to continue right now because of the sin that happened with Adam and Eve. And it says, "You eat of this fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall surely die." And that's what happened. But now Jesus has already conquered that, but for a short period of time, he's allowing death and Hades to occur. But when the fullness of time comes, then they'll be done away with. There'll be no more death. You and I will be able to live forever, eternal life, because of Jesus conquering of death on the cross. So it's a beautiful thing. If you look at Revelations 20:13, ask if John, if you can look that up. Revelations 20:13 and 14.
The sea gave up its dead, and death and the grave gave up their dead, and all were judged according to their deeds. When death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire. This lake of fire is the second death.
So eventually, in verse 14, it says, "Death," and in the New King James Version, it says Hades, which is the grave, is the place of the dead. Then death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. So they'll be destroyed. They'll be in the lake of fire along with Satan and all those who did not accept the gospel of Jesus Christ. They'll be in there with them. So, and then it says, "Authority was given to death and Hades to destroy 1/4 of the population of the earth." 1/4 is a lot, but God allowed them to destroy 1/4. Now, I looked up these statistics online. Population in the earth today is 7.9 billion people. And a quarter of that, actually I did the math, a quarter of that is 1.94 billion people, which is almost like 2 billion people. That's a lot of people. 2 billion people is a lot of people. What's the population of Canada? Is 37.5 million or something like that, 38
Yeah,
million.
something like that.
This is talking 2 billion. 2 billion
Like all of
people.
Canada, all of the states gone.
Oh, totally gone, like several times over. That was in World War II. I looked up some statistics. In World War II, there was 56 million people who died in World War II. Now, this year is 2 billion. It's just like having like 40 or 50 World War IIs. And people were amazed at how many people died during World War II. 50 million people died during the Spanish flu. And there was 6.2 million people died from this COVID-19. 6.2 million, which from the population, it's not even 1%, it's 0.07% of the world's population died, I think. You know, I think of John MacArthur, where he, people in his church early on in the pandemic, they would, they just started coming back. They weren't asked, they were coming back because they didn't buy the idea. They said less than 1% of the people will die. This, well, this is, I'm not going to stop going to church because for less than 1%. And actually, God bless them, they did really, really well. So but let's look at death. Death uses 4 tools in this grim task that they have. And in Revelation 8, you'll see that. And the power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death. In the ESV, it says pestilence, and by the beasts of the earth. Also by the beasts of the earth. So here refers to disease as a primary cause of death, but also pestilence encompasses like natural disasters and earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, and biological weapons, chemical weapons, things like that. And in the scriptures, it's very interesting. In the scripture, the sword, the famine, and pestilence are often linked together. And you'll see them linked together in the thing. So if you look up Jeremiah 14:12, just we're after Isaiah. Ask if Marcella, if you can look it up. Jeremiah 14:12. And I'll ask John if you look up Jeremiah 24:10 after that. And then Nancy, if you can look up Ezekiel 6:11.
Okay.
After, so Marcella, whenever you're ready, Jeremiah 14:12.
When they fast, I will not hear their cry, and when they offer burnt offering and an oblation, I will not accept them, but I will consume them by the sword and by the famine and by the pestilence.
That's it. God doesn't pull any punches. He says, I'll consume them by the sword, by the famine, and by pestilence. I'll consume them. Some people today will say, oh, I don't want nothing to do with that kind of God. But people today who don't want nothing to do with God, they'll say that, oh, I don't want that. But he's a righteous God, and that's what he does. Go ahead, John, Jeremiah 24:10.
And I will send war, famine, and disease until they have vanished from the land of Israel, which I gave to them and their ancestors.
Amen. So again, he says, I'll send the sword and the famine and pestilence among them. And then Ezekiel 6:11, Nancy.
Yes, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Clap your hands in horror, stomp your feet, cry out because of all the detestable sins the people of Israel have committed. Now they are going to die from war and famine and disease.
So again, he's using war, famine, and pestilence to kill his people who come. And this is his people, Israel.
Can I read, Carlos, can I read 13?
Yeah, go ahead.
They will know that I am the Lord when their dead lie scattered among their idols and altars on every hill and mountain and under every green tree and every great shade tree, the places where they offered sacrifices to their idols. So see,
Amen.
that's the righteous part. I like to read that.
Yeah, for the righteous part. Yep.
I have to go.
Oh, you gotta go. Okay. Thank you. I'll send you guys,
Bye,
I'll send you the
Marcella.
video.
Send me the
after.
link and I'll finish up. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. You take care. God bless you. All
I
right.
have to go too, Carlos, but I got 2 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got a long stretch of Ezekiel that I wanted someone to read. So if you got 2 minutes, maybe you can read
Okay.
that. It's in that book, Ezekiel 14
Mhm.
and verses 12 all the way to 21. So there's a lot of reading there, and then that'll be your last reading for today.
Okay, 14 and 12,
12
21.
all the way to
Okay.
21.
All right. Then this message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, suppose the people of a country were to sin against me, and I lifted my fist to crush them, cutting off their food supply and sending a famine to destroy both people and animals. Even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were there, their righteousness would save no one but themselves, says the sovereign Lord. Or suppose I were to send wild animals to invade the country, kill the people, and make the land too desolate and dangerous to pass through. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, even if those 3 men were there, they wouldn't be able to save their own sons or daughters. They alone would be saved, but the land would be made desolate. Or suppose I were to bring war against the land, and I sent enemy armies to destroy both people and animals. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, even if those 3 men were there, they wouldn't be able to save their own sons or daughters. They alone would be saved. Or suppose I were to pour out my fury by sending an epidemic into the land, and the disease killed people and animals alike. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were there, they wouldn't be able to save their own sons or daughters. They alone would be saved by their righteousness. Now, this is what the sovereign Lord says, how terrible it will be when all 4 of these dreadful punishments fall upon Jerusalem: war, famine, wild animals, and disease, destroying all her people and animals.
Amen. Amen. Specifically that last verse, verse 21, how much more it shall be when I send my 4 severe judgments on Jerusalem, the sword,
Right.
the famine, the wild beasts, and pestilence to cut off man and beast from it. And on that note, I will see you next
Okay.
time, Nancy. God
Thank
bless
you.
you.
God bless.
I'll send you the video after.
Okay. Bye, John. Take care. Bye, Carlos.
Take care. Bye, Nancy. All right. In Matthew 24:7, John, now it's just me and you.
Yeah.
I would have to talk back and forth. Matthew 24:7 is Jesus says, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." So there'll be famines and pestilences. During the United States Civil War, more Union and Confederate soldiers died from disease than they did from the actual battle. So 30 million died during the great influenza epidemic, 1918-19, and which is more than 3 times than World War I, just 4 years before, like just before that. The war was 1914 to 1918. So 3 times as many people died of the disease afterward, which is, so pandemics could be devastating. It would seem strange to have the inclusion of wild beasts in these things. You notice, I don't see wild beasts living in populated areas like downtown Detroit, downtown Windsor, the big cities like New York, Los Angeles. You don't see lions and things like that. So I don't see the thing. But one thing that they do have in these big cities is the rats. And if you remember, during the time of the bubonic plague and the Black Death in Europe, the rats were the main carriers of disease that killed about almost 1/3 of Europe back in the 13th century. So, so when you're gonna have famine, chaos, rats looking for food and competing with humans for food, they will be carrying disease and that will escalate the pandemic that will occur in addition to the famine, to the thing. So don't underestimate the rat. The rat is going to play a big role during that time. So nothing in the first 4 seals, John wrote, as yet occurred. So everything that we just talked about, these were 4 seals, it hasn't yet occurred. It's you know, a lot of things have happened during that, but none of this has occurred. So that means that it's still going to occur at that time. That tells you that the tribulation is in the future. It's yet to come. Because some people have said that tribulation has already happened around 70 AD, and some people believe that, but none of it fully took place yet. So it's yet to come. So, and then the far worse yet to come are the 3 seals that are coming. So we did the first 4 seals and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but the next ones will be even worse. So there's 3 more seals, and then there's 7 trumpets and 7 bowls to come. In Hebrews 10:31, the writer writes, at that time, the world of sinners will realize that it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And we will see that during the Revelation. It's not a pleasant thing. There's going to be no escape for anyone who's an unrepentant sinner. And they will go through the terrors of this tribulation. Hebrews 2:3 also say, and how will we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? So God provided our salvation to everyone in this world, but some don't want the salvation of the Lord. But eventually, how will they escape it? They won't. So that brings it to the 5th seal. And I don't know if we're going to have enough time to do all the 5th seal, but we'll do as much as we can, okay? Now, the 5th seal is the prayers for vengeance. So a lot of people don't see it that way, but it's actually praying for vengeance, and God is vengeful. He's going to pay back. And so, and that you'll find that in Revelation 6:9-11. So if you have a chance there, if you can read that, John, Revelation 6:9-11.
When the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of all who had been martyred for the word of God and for being faithful in their testimony. They shouted to the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you judge the people who belong to this world and avenge our blood for what they have done to us? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and they were told to rest a little longer until the full number of their brothers and sisters, their fellow servants of Jesus, who were to be martyred, had joined them.
Amen. So, as I was saying before, this 5th seal is about prayers for vengeance. The saints are praying for vengeance. They're saying, how long, Lord, will it be? In the New King James Version, it says, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth. To avenge, you would think, oh, that's kind of petty. You want to get vengeance on this? But God's vengeance isn't like that. God's vengeance isn't petty. Like some of us, we just, we want to be vindictive with no reason at all. But God is not like that. God is just. And so now the scene, the first 4 seals, the 4 horsemen, took place on the earth. Now Just like if you're watching a movie, the scene goes to the throne room of heaven again. Okay, the throne before God. We have the four creatures, the 24 elders, the angels, the lamb, the lamb who opened the seals, and they're all there. So the scene is back there again. And so even though the Lord and God is loving and kind and gracious, he's also a vengeful God. He's a just God also. Most people don't want to hear that. They just want to know that God is good and kind, and that they don't want to know that God, is vengeful. But that's who he is. He is like, but he's a righteous vengefulness that he has. That's Deuteronomy 32:35. He says, vengeance is mine and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them. So God is saying, vengeance is mine and recompense. In Deuteronomy, I'm going to read some of these. I'm going to ask you to help me read some of these so that we can go a little quicker through it. Deuteronomy 32:41. It says, if I wet my glittering sword, now God is talking, if I wet my glittering sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to my enemies. It says, and repay those who hate me. So the Lord in the Old Testament is up front. He says, I will take vengeance on my enemies. Deuteronomy 32:43 says, rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will avenge the blood of his servants and render vengeance to his adversaries. He will provide atonement for his land and his people. And there's also several psalms that they call imprecatory psalms. Have you ever heard of that, John? Imprecatory psalms?
No.
It's taken from the word imprecate. And the word imprecate means to call down calamity on someone. So there's a lot of psalms where people says, oh Lord, bring vengeance on them. So David did that a lot. So it's a lot of the psalms, and there's several of them where they ask God to bring vengeance on their enemies. They're called imprecatory psalms. That's what they're called. Try to remember that word, imprecatory. Psalm 64:7. I'll read that to you. But God shall shoot at them with an arrow. Suddenly they shall be wounded. So he will make them stumble over their own tongue. All who see them shall flee away. All men shall fear and shall declare the work of God, for they shall wisely consider his doing. So that's an imprecatory psalm, because God is showing vengeance. Why should the nations say, right, this is a different psalm, Psalm 79:10. Says, why should the nations say, where is their God? Let there be known among the nations in our sight the avenging of the blood of your servants which has been shed. So again, the avenging of the blood. I'm going to ask you to look up Psalm 94 verses 1-3. You can look at Psalm 94 verses 1-3.
O Lord, the God of vengeance, O God of vengeance, let your glorious justice shine forth. Arise, O Judge of the earth, give the proud what they deserve. How long, O Lord? How long will the wicked be allowed to gloat?
Amen. And he says, isn't that what the prayers of the saints are under the altar in the fifth seal? Just saying, how long, O Lord? In verse 1, it says, O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongs. To whom vengeance belongs. If you look down in that verse, that same Psalm, verse 23, John, Psalm 94:23.
God will turn the sins of evil people back on them. He will destroy them for their sins. The Lord of our God will destroy them.
There you go. God will destroy them. My version says he will cut them off. Okay, and there's several other psalms that do that. Other psalms are such as Psalm 7, Psalm 35, Psalm 40, 55, 58, 59, 69, 109, 137, and 144. All those are imprecatory psalms, and they all speak about God's vengeance. Enough said about God is just love. No, he's also vengeful, righteous vengefulness. And also the prophets talked about God's vengefulness. Isaiah 34, 1-3. I'll read that one. Come near, you nations, all hear and heed, you people. Let the earth hear and all that is in it, the world and all things that have come forth from it. For the indignation of the Lord is against all nations. He's indignant. And his fury against all their armies. Oh, he's furious against the armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to the slaughter. Also their slain shall be thrown out. Their stench shall rise from their corpses. It means they've died and they're going to start smelling. And the mountains shall be melted with their blood. So this is God's destructive side. That's his vengeful side. In the same chapter, in verse 8, it says, for it is the day of the Lord's vengeance, the year of recompense for the cause of Zion. So there's a time for vengeance. And as we are seeing in the book of Revelations, it's time for vengeance. And God during the fifth seal is hearing the prayers of the saints who say, how long before you avenge us in this world. I'll ask you to look up Isaiah 59, 17 and 18. Isaiah 59, 17 and 18.
He put on righteousness as his body armor, and placed the helmet of salvation on his head. He clothed himself with a robe of vengeance, and wrapped himself in a cloak of divine passion.
Amen.
He will
Go ahead.
He will repay his enemies for their evil deeds. His fury will fall on his foes. He will pay them back even to the ends of the earth.
Amen. Amen. In Isaiah 61, if you go up a couple more chapters, John 61, verses 1 through 1 and 2. Isaiah 61, verses 1 and 2.
The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted, and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it the day of God's anger against their enemies.
Amen. In the New King James Version, verse 2, it says, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn. So this is talking about Jesus when he would come, that he came to proclaim the day of vengeance. So Isaiah 63:4, it says, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come. Can you look up Jeremiah 46:10?
Sure.
Jeremiah 46:10.
For this is the day of the Lord, the Lord of heaven's armies, a day of vengeance on his enemies. The sword will devour until it is satisfied. Yes, until it is drunk with your blood. The Lord of heaven's armies, will receive a sacrifice today in the north country beside the Euphrates River.
And in verse 10, for this is the day of the Lord God of hosts, a day of vengeance. Micah 5:15, Micah writes, and I will execute vengeance in anger and fury on the nations that have not heard. I will execute vengeance in anger and fury on the nations that have not heard. And he's saying they have not heard. Well, that's not a good reason to, or is it? Yeah, it is. God has a reason, and his reason is just. Nahum 1:2 says, God is jealous and the Lord avenges. The Lord avenges and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserves wrath for his enemies. So Malachi 4:1 and 2, for behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, and all the proud, yes, all who do wickedly, will be stubble. I mean, they'll be burned. And the day which is coming shall burn them up, says the Lord of hosts, that will leave them neither root nor branch. But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and grow fat like stalled fat calves. So in the same, but those who fear his name, they will do well. The Son of Righteousness will arise, and healing will come to them, and you shall go out and grow fat like stalled fat calves. So you're going to do well if you believe in my name and if you fear my name.
What about the people that are from nations that never heard of Jesus? Like they didn't have like a lot of the people there just never had the opportunity to know him or even heard of him. Are they also gonna face God's vengeance?
Well, most people on the earth have already heard the gospel because of communications, TV, satellite, internet, and so on. And but just because they were brought under different, like if they were born and raised in Islam or in other out in the Far East, Confucius, they were Hindu and things like that, which are false religions. It's not so much they're false religions. Think of it that none of us deserve to be saved. None of us deserve eternal life. We all deserve to die. We're all guilty, every single one of us. None of us do. So we all, but because of God's grace, we're able to be saved because of him alone, only him alone. So people that haven't known, they're sinners like us because we're all come from Adam and Eve. We're all sinners. We all deserve to die. And God has wanted all of them to know about it. And those that have heard it and didn't accept it, well, they've rejected him. But because of rejecting that salvation that he gave them, caused them to die and be punished and have God's vengeance on them. But I think that's the answer, is that none of us deserve to die. I can't say, oh, well, I didn't know, so I should be excluded from that. No, I deserve to die because I'm a sinner. I sin, and sin, the wages of sin is death.
But if to determine if they're going to go to heaven, but they never heard of God before, would that just be a conversation they would have with God after they die?
Well, every single one of us, them and us, all of us will come before God's judgment in the final day, before the great white throne. And then the books will be open. There's books that will be open. And then another book will be open. So the books are the things that every single one of us did, are things. And then there'll be another book that are for those or which is the book of life. And that is the ones that have been written in the book of life, that Christ has died for them. They've accepted the salvation and the sacrifice that Christ had, and those are in the book of life. And there's these other books here that are for all the things that people have done. And so if a person is a good person and they try to work out their salvation by good deeds and by thing, but they haven't accepted Christ and says, no, I'm a good person. Well, that person's not written in the book of life. So only those that are written in the book of life will enter into heaven, to the kingdom of heaven. The other one will be judged and will be thrown in the lake of fire. That sounds like a terrible thing to do, but that's God's righteous judgment. Because God is holy, and there's no place in heaven for sin or sinfulness. That's just the way it is. And some people say, well, that's not fair, but it is fair, because none of us deserve to live. None of us. That's kind of the way it is. I don't know if that answered your question, John. But my prayer is that, go ahead, John.
It mostly answered my question. It's just like, what about like if you're like a tribal person that grew up like in a small like tribe in a jungle that like never had any you never had any access to any like civilization, so you just never even knew Jesus at all. Like, would that just be something that God would talk with them later, and if they give their heart to God at that point, that would be sufficient?
If they gave their heart to God and realized that their sinfulness and that a sacrifice had to be offered them somewhere, and if they understood that God may, I don't know, because I think of like Abraham and all the Old Testament saints. Well, they were looking for a promise. They didn't come and say, Lord, I believe in Jesus, and therefore I'm saying, well, Jesus hadn't come yet. So they were looking forward to that Messiah that God was going to send them. So, and they believed God that he was going to send him, and they and so they were justified because of their belief, like Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him for righteousness. So in that sense, he was justified. But people in the remotest part of the earth had never heard God, and they if God showed himself to him in some way, he would want him to know about his son, Jesus Christ. So what he did, that's why he told his disciples and said, go into all the world, because he wanted everybody to hear, or else he would have dealt with them there in their own tribes in the middle of the jungles, and like the pygmies in Africa, for example. But no, he told us, go into all the world and preach the good news of the gospel to every creature. And that was a thing for the missionary movement started from Paul and the apostles. They went out right away because they needed to hear the word. And now will they know unless somebody preached to them. So the word had to go out, because Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. So some people had to hear it. A lot of people heard it, but they rejected it. Says, oh no, I don't accept that. And they've heard it. And some people maybe never heard it, but most people in this world have heard it. And most people have heard it, especially today with telecommunications and that. most people reject it, even here in Canada and United States, which for 100 or so years ago, we used to send out missionaries all over the world. Now people think it says, oh, that's religious. I don't accept that. I live my life the way I want. And this is here in North America. Europe is the same way. They've heard it, but they says, oh no, that's not for me. I don't know. I feel, God, I'm God. I make the decisions, and so they rejected God. So eventually they have to hear the word. They have to hear the word. So for me, I look at myself, John. It says, I am deserving of death, and because of his gift, and I'm so thankful that I heard it as a young boy, and then eventually as I grew up older, then eventually I decided to accept him. But it's not because of anything that I did, is that he provided this gift of grace to me that I do not deserve at all. And he says, Carlos, if you accept the sacrifice of my son on the cross, you will be saved. And I did. And I think that we have to do that. We have to accept Christ. That's the main thing. Anyway, let's get back. Oh my goodness, let's just leave it here. I'm going to put a mark because it's actually time. And this book of Revelations, I never studied it so deeply as I have. I've been a Christian for a very long time. I had read the book of Revelations, but now I've really studied it, and I'm getting to know more about God, who He is. He's a loving God, but He's a vengeful God, as we just read today. But it's a righteous vengeance, and it's a fearful thing to get on God's wrong side, because God can totally destroy his enemies. It's better to be not to be his enemy, but to be his friend, and even better to be his son and his daughter. It's good to have a fear of the Lord. It's so it will give you eternal life, as my good friend Roger at Veritas always says. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? You die of 70, you live 70, 80 years, and after that there's an eternity. Where are you going to spend billions and zillions of years? Are you going to spend with Christ, or are you going to spend in a lake of fire? It says you have to make that decision, before you die. The sooner the better. And so I always remember what he says about that. It says, yeah, choose to live, choose Christ. That's the main thing. Because there's a 7-year tribulation coming, and it's going to be really awful. So it's good to be on God's side. And in order to do that, you have to come to Christ. Anyway, let's have a word of prayer. John, I ask you to open in prayer. I'm going to ask you to close in prayer, okay? Unless you have a question. Well, you just had a question, and I answered it in a very, very long way.
I mean, like, we know that the tribulation is coming soon-ish.
I would say so. We don't know the time yet, but it's going to be soon.
I guess you won't know for sure until you start to see some of the signs from the book of Revelation coming out, like the mark of the beast, and like war, and then someone that says that they're God, but they're not.
Even before that, if somebody makes a deal with Israel, it's going to be probably a political leader or some kind, makes a deal to protect Israel, and makes a deal to do that. That is a big sign. So look for that, and keep your eye on Israel. Everything revolves around Israel, God's people. God is coming back to Jerusalem. The big war of Armageddon will take place in Israel.
They're going to build a temple.
They're going to rebuild the temple, yeah. Right, probably right next to that Dome of the Rock. I've heard someone talk about that. There's a space there that was fit just right next to it, and people already have plans to build it. You know, everything is in place to build it until such a time that, you know, it's ready to go. So when you start seeing that happen, it's, you know things are happening. The Antichrist will be working to make a deal, bring false peace, and then there's a big war will start. And then from war, then it will escalate. There'll be famines, and people will die. I'm saying, and God will take vengeance, as we were seeing in the fifth seal. Be a lot of people dying. So that's what I would look for. Those are the things that I would look for. I keep an eye on that all the time. But it's more important to me, John, these things are good. More and more I'm realizing it's more important to have my life right with God, repent of sins that are consistent in my life. Sometimes I feel, oh Lord, what a sinful guy I am. You know, it's important for me to make things right with God. It's important for me to also preach the gospel, or not so much preach, proclaim the gospel. Make sure that others know it. You know, we're talking about, what about those people that never heard it? Well, a lot of people never heard it because the people are afraid to tell them. And we as believers have to be bold and have courage and wisdom to tell people. It says, you know, Christ loves you. You know, he wants to save you from your sin. He sent his son to die for your sins. And it's important for us to proclaim that. People may accept it, people may not accept it. That's our job, is just to proclaim it. And it's important for us to do that.
So if you don't proclaim the gospel, and you're sort of like you're embarrassed to show your beliefs in Jesus, then that means that when the time comes that you come in front of the Father, Jesus will be embarrassed to be with you there. So that means that you don't, since you didn't like be bold about it, you didn't really love Jesus. You sort of put yourself first.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a question about being saved. Once saved, always saved. If God's saving you, you're truly saved. God will give you a boldness to proclaim. He says, if you're ashamed of me before men, then I'll be ashamed of you before my Father. And if you love the Lord Jesus in word only, you just say, yeah, I believe in God, but you know, you really don't live a life with him in your heart, and you live your own life, but he's got maybe a section of your heart, but not your whole life. He says, well, if you're ashamed of me, then I'll be ashamed of you. But if you truly believe in Christ, he will give you boldness. He'll give you the desire to tell people. That happened to me when I was a young Christian, 18, with the people that I was learning the Bible with in our Bible study. We had a thing about going and preaching the God, and we did. And sometimes I did so many stupid things, John. I would say things that I shouldn't have said, and because I was young and stupid. And I've learned, you know, to be wiser and how to approach people and how to talk. But it's important for us not to be ashamed of it. And people need to know about God and his salvation. Now, you're not saved because of that. You're saved because you accept Christ and because he paid for your price. But if you love Christ, you want to do that for him. You know, he told us, it's one of his commandments, go into all the world, preach the good news. So first in Jerusalem, and then Samaria, then the uttermost part of the earth, he said. Now, obviously he was talking to the disciples. Well, we don't live in Jerusalem. So, but us, we live where we live. We have families, we have friends, we have our jobs, we have people that are friends and people that we meet every day. It says that's our field, that's our mission field. All those people, and God will open the door if you're really interested. God will open the door for you to talk to those people and proclaim the gospel. And so look for those opportunities and pray, God, open the door so I can proclaim your good news to the person who's lost, so that he can go to heaven too, so he doesn't have to go to the lake of fire, because God loves everybody, And so that's part of being a believer, should be part of our DNA, is to spread that light. What do you say? It says, you're the light of the world. This is a city that's set on a hill cannot be hidden. Not of the man light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on the candlestick, so it lights everyone that's in the house. So it says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And so he wants you to be a light to this world, and by the things that you do, your life, plus the things that you say. Make sure God's word is in your mouth. Things that come out is glorifying to God. Anyway, let's have a word of prayer. John, could you close us in a prayer?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jesus, for giving your life on the cross. You suffered a lot of pain and torment and ridicule, and you did all that because you love us, and you gave us all the opportunity to live an eternal life where you completely forgive us all of our sin, and we live happily for eternity in heaven. And thank you for touching the hearts of the disciples that spread your word throughout the entire world. And thank you, God, for the seals that were broken, and the first 4 were the horses, false peace, war, famine, death, and then vengeance. And this was all part of your plan. And throughout all of this, you're always trying to touch everyone's heart to come to you. And also, even during the time of the tribulation, you still are trying to save as many souls as you can. And I'd just like to ask you to help lead me to be able to bring more people into your kingdom. And I'd just like to thank you for Carlos, because he's done such a great job as your servant, teaching us about you and helping us have a better relationship with you, Lord. And I'd just like to pray for everyone in our Bible study, and pray for the people of Ukraine, Russia, and amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, John. God bless you. That was a beautiful prayer. Thank you so much.
I don't know why, but I was thinking of praying about the Toronto Maple Leafs winning in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but I left that part out.
Yeah, it's all right. They play tonight. I'm gonna watch that when we're done. They're gonna do well. I think Toronto's gonna do well this year.
Yeah, they're good. They can definitely make it far. So
yeah, I think so.
I like to see them get out of the first round. They always lose in the first round, it seems. So,
yeah, but I think this year they're gonna go past the first round. My team, Detroit, is rebuilding. They're not so good right now, but I always watch them. So anyway, take care. God bless you.
okay. Thanks, Carlos. God bless. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.